Oh, yes, it is 5 rounds here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. I'm going to have to let Frank and James do most of the talking. I have very little voice left, guys, but while the little voice I have, I saved it to talk UFC 269. We have a huge pay-per-view coming up on Saturday. I want to remind you guys that every single episode of 5 Rounds is proudly served by the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. This is a great time to remind you the Quarterdeck has every UFC pay-per-view fight for zero cover charge. You pay nothing at the door this Saturday to watch UFC 269, watch Charles Oliveira defend his belt against Max Holloway. You pay nothing at the door. They got TVs covering every single wall. Guys, the seafood is always fresh. It's so delicious at the Quarterdeck. I love the 2-for-1 happy hour. The 2-for-1 happy hour is all day, every day. 2-for-1 drinks, my friends. The big TVs covering every wall. The sandwiches and burgers are awesome. Make sure you save at least a little room for the key lime cheesecake. That is the perfect way to finish every meal. So head on out to the Quarterdeck. We're going to have an NBA watch party out there on December 15th. That's this coming Wednesday to watch a little Miami Heat basketball. The Quarterdeck, come for the food, stay for the fun. I can hear Frank, you're snickering at me, Frank.
You showed up an hour and 15 minutes late with no voice? I mean, what's wrong with you?
Let me guess, Alex. You've been screaming about the Canes finally spending resources on their football program last couple of days. Is that it?
James knows. James knows that's what's been going on. I also, of course, my kid brings home daycare germs. It's a whole thing. It's a whole mess. Let me officially introduce my co-hosts on this episode, as we will be talking plenty of Oliveira taking on Dustin Poirier. By the way, in just a few minutes, we're going to be joined by Kevin Aioli of Yahoo Sports, who's going to be with us, and Steve from ParamountSports.com is going to join us a little bit later on for a betting preview of this upcoming card. Since Frank Zaffere is having some fun at my expense. Frank, thank you for waiting the extra hour and 10 minutes. How are you, sir?
I'm great. You sound like shit, brother. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you. It's great to hear you. James Walker, of course. James, how are you?
Doing great. Looking forward to a good Saturday of fights in the pay-per-view. Even though the Masvidal-Leon Edwards cancellation kind of bummed me out, but that's all right. Good card overall.
Yeah, that bummed me out as well. You know, with my vocal situation, you remember when Michael Buffer, he showed up to Mayweather versus Pacquiao, which had to have been one of the biggest fights he ever ring announced before, and he had probably less of a voice than I have right now.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I don't remember that either.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I was the only one that watched that fight. So I know we're all going to be watching the fight this coming weekend. Early thoughts, Frank, I'll start with you on Oliveira versus Holloway. You know, you and I, we had a chance to sit down earlier this week, and it seemed like we're both kind of 50-50 on this one. I'm leaning a little bit to Poirier. It sounded like you're leaning a little bit towards Oliveira.
I am. I'm leaning more and more heavily in his direction. I mean, for two reasons. I mean, one, I think that Dustin Poirier has a little bit of the Cowboy Cerrone disease where, you know, every once in a while he mails one in that really doesn't reflect his actual ability and normal preparation. He's due for one of those, unfortunately. And number two, and perhaps more, you know, more specific to actual X's and O's and breaking this down, I think Oliveira's length and his skill as it's evolved over time present challenges for Dustin Poirier that he's going to have a hard time dealing with. You know, Dustin, you know, I've seen him get outstruck. I've seen him be out-grappled. I've seen all those kinds of things happen to him. And Charles Oliveira is capable of doing all those things to him. I also think there's a psychological issue here where I think Poirier's been hearing like, yeah, whenever you step in there, it's your belt. You're just going to take it. And I think after a while, it starts to sink in a little bit. Maybe he comes in a little overconfident and who would have ever thought this? But the champion literally has nothing to lose. Charles Oliveira can roll in there and just let it go. And that's a dangerous opponent for Dustin Poirier.
Yeah, and I really see this as a 50-50 fight as well. And I've been leaning Poirier the whole time. And now, man, just as the talk has kind of geared up for UFC 269, I just feel like Oliveira is so overlooked for a champion. I can't remember a champion being this overlooked this calendar year. I mean, every champion going into a fight, I mean, you almost would think Dustin Poirier is the champion, you know, and a lot of people do think Dustin Poirier is kind of the uncrowned champion. So, yeah, it's a 50-50 fight for me. I'm not really sure which way I'm leaning. Maybe by the end of the show, I'll make a prediction. But I want to hear the odds. I want to hear the odds on this because I want to see what kind of value is there.
Well, it's close. I mean, we talk about how close it is just from a feel standpoint. Dustin Poirier's favored -135. That's not a huge number. Oliveira, the champ, is +125 as the underdog. And let's bring on our first guest, and he does write an excellent betting column at yahoosports.com. And this man covers MMA and boxing at such a high level. I apologize for my lack of voice, Kevin Ioli. So I'm going to let Frank and James do most of the talking. How are you?
All right, now we got a show going.
I will start with you though, Kevin, because we were just discussing, who we give the edge to in Oliveira Poirier, and I'd love your take. Let's start with the main event, Kevin, because this one seems very close to call. I think Oliveira has more ways to win the fight when you factor in his excellent submissions, but Poirier has been the guy whose just star has been rising so much as of late. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's an unbelievable fight. We use BetMGM odds at Yahoo Sports, and at BetMGM, Poirier is a 160 favorite, so 8-5, and Oliveira is +135. So if you like Oliveira, there's some value there compared to the odds that I heard you mention before. And my take, like when I look at this, I think the thing I would say is who is going to make the least amount of mistakes. And I think when you look at what Charles has done over his career, it's going to be Charles. Charles, he made a lot of mistakes against Chandler, but it didn't cost him. Chandler's such an aggressive guy that is going balls to the wall all the time, and so he'll make some mistakes. And I think against Dustin Poirier, a really technical, calculated, smart fighter, I don't think you can afford to make those mistakes. Poirier, I don't think anybody would argue that Charles has better jiu-jitsu than Poirier, but Poirier is so well-rounded. There's no weakness, and he's good in every area. And I just think that he's a dangerous. I have him all the way up to number 2 on my pound-for-pound list. So I think Poirier is going to find a way to win the fight, and he'll do it just by making fewer mistakes, I believe.
Kevin, I know Justin Gaethje kind of started this conversation in questioning Oliveira's heart and his, maybe how he will respond in deep water, barring his last fight, because he did respond, after almost being finished. But do you think that's overstated in what they're saying with Oliveira, that he hasn't really, he hasn't really shown the grit that a Gaethje or Dustin Poirier or other, top fighters in that division has shown him to date?
God, I'll tell you what. I mean, you look at a lot of his fights, and I never think of Charles Oliveira as a front runner. I mean, I think this is a gritty, tough guy who finds ways to win fights even when he's not at his best. I don't think that he's fought the level of opposition that, say, Dustin Poirier has. You look at Poirier's 5 best fight, 5 top opponents. He's fought Khabib, he's fought Conor twice, he's fought Max Holloway twice. You go on and on down the list, and Oliveira hasn't had as many guys of that ilk as he had. So maybe, you say Poirier's a little better, but Poirier has, Oliveira has just overcome against so many guys, and he's been in dog fights that he's come and pulled out and won. He's been ahead. So I just really, think that that's a misnomer. I'm not sure where that came from. And far be it for me to say Justin Gaethje is wrong when he's evaluating a fighter, because he knows a hell of a lot more about this than I'll ever know. But I've watched Charles's career, and I just look at him and say, I think this is a tough guy who's pulled himself up from the bootstraps at the very beginning and continues to do that.
Hey, Kevin, maybe this sounds like an odd question, but I'm more intrigued with the next fight. Like, who can win the next fight in this division? Because it's probably against Justin Gaethje. So do you see Dustin Poirier as that guy, or Charles?
Well, Poirier's already beaten, so Poirier has
right. I know,
and that changed. I think it's interesting because Gaethje is a guy that you saw that fight against Chandler, right? I mean, just he's going to go crazy, he's going to go all out. If we get the Justin Gaethje that is fought Tony Ferguson, really patient and taking his time, he's still an aggressive fighter. He's still an unbelievable fighter. But that's to me the Justin Gaethje that I think is the most dangerous. And then I would say, yeah, I think that, he would be right in the mix with either one of these guys. But if you get the Justin that kind of like, went after Chandler the way he did, I think he opens up a lot of holes. And I think, both Charles and Dustin could take advantage. So Frank, to answer your question, I think, Gaethje, I think these three guys are very even. They're different fighters, right? And I think they all have the ability to win these matches. But I think that it's going to come down to who's able to implement their game plan and fight their fight. So whoever gets to Justin Gaethje is going to have to be able to deal with that storm that he throws. I think both guys have the ability to do that, but obviously Gaethje is going to have something to say.
By the way, speaking of the lightweight division, our guy Alex M writes in on Daryush versus Islam Mahachev. He says he's leaning Daryush. I'm strongly leaning Mahachev. What do you think about that upcoming fight, Kevin? And do you see? Yeah, I think it's an easy one to love. And do you think, like me, that Mahachev could very well be a future lightweight champion, or am I overrating him a bit because of the Khabib connection?
I think they both can be future lightweight champions, I think that Mahachev is a step above Daryush. I think Daryush is fantastic, and I think he is shortchanged by far too many people. Look at his resume, look who he's beaten, look at how he's beaten them. Look at, there's no flaws in that guy. I love him, but I think, that wrestling that Mahachev has is kind of like Hamzat. We have to see more from Hamzat. But in these 4 fights that we've seen from Hamzat, including against Li Jingliang, he takes you completely out of your game. And Mahachev has that kind of wrestling that can do it. And, while his striking, nobody would compare his striking to, say, Sean O'Malley or somebody like that, it's good enough to get him by, and he doesn't make the wild mistakes with his striking that he had made before. He's more calculated as a striker. So I think, Mahachev is the guy there, and I think Mahachev is going to be a problem for any of these guys. I think the guy that would have the best chance of beating Mahachev might be Charles Oliveira because of the style matchup, but I think that, that's what I think the lightweight division is going to be fantastic because, you can throw these names in a hat and you come out and, the guy that you favor when they fight each other, you wouldn't favor if they fought somebody else. You'd favor different people. I think it's just one of those, the division is really good loaded with talent, with diverse skills. And I think it's, we have a lot of good fights ahead of us in that division.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I was just going to say, do you agree, Kevin? Like we've talked on the show and had some other people on that would suggest that if Islam was matched up with any of these top guys in the division right now, that he'd be the favorite. Would that be what you'd expect to see from Vegas?
What I would say is this: if Poirier wins this, let's say Poirier wins 2 fights because he'd have to beat Oliveira, then he'd have to beat Gaethje. I think if Poirier did that going into a Mahachev fight, Dustin Poirier would be the favorite because, you'd be looking at him coming off 2 wins over Conor McGregor, a win over Charles Oliveira, a win over Justin Gaethje going into a Mahachev fight. How do you think Dustin's not going to be the favorite there? I think against the other 3 guys, clearly against Daryush, he's going to be the favorite. And I think against Justin and against Charles that he would be favored too. But I think, I think Charles would be the fight that would be the one that would give him the most trouble because Charles would be the only one that had the kind of jiu-jitsu and probably the jiu-jitsu defense that you have to have to handle Islam Mahachev.
We are joined here by Kevin Ioli from Yahoo Sports. Does an awesome job covering both MMA and boxing. Let's take a look at the co-main event, Kevin. Now, Amanda Nunes, baddest woman on the planet, and she is favored as such. I'm looking at her at betus.com as a minus 1,000 favorite to Juliana Peña's plus 600. What does Juliana Peña have to do to pull this upset off?
Pray.
Bring a weapon.
I don't know what else she can do. I'll be honest with you. Like, I wrote a column the other day and Juliana's been running her mouth off and Amanda's ducking her. And I'm going, what are you talking about? Like, look at who Amanda has fought. And, she has fought everybody out there. There's no, and Juliana is 2-2 and she hasn't had a 2-fight winning streak in 5 years? I mean, it's crazy. And so I just don't, I look at the fight and I go, I do not see a way. If they go on the ground, I think Amanda will submit her. If it's a stand-up fight, I think Amanda will knock her out. I don't see where Peña has an advantage unless, the only argument that I could make for Juliana would be this. Amanda struggles to make the weight. She's fought her last couple fights at 145. She struggles and is weight drained and doesn't have her normal body and style in the ring. And if that happens, okay, then that changes the dynamic of the fight. But if Amanda makes weight easily, which it sounds like she will do from what I got from talking to her, then I believe that Juliana Peña is in a lot of trouble.
Now, from a betting perspective, is there anything you do with this fight? Obviously, you're not betting Amanda minus 1,000, but is there any sort of a prop or a method of victory, or maybe use something in a parlay? Anything you do here?
Yeah, I think Amanda by finish is a bet you can look at. And I think, if you want to play something on one of the rounds, I would be afraid to pick method of victory because you can make an equal argument for submission or knockout, right? And so you're just guessing at that point. But I think if you play her inside the distance, and I think she wins the fight in 3 rounds or less. She's been more active, so.
You threw some money on her opponents, like playing the lotto with better odds. I mean, if you got a couple bucks to burn.
That's the key phrase right there, to burn. Your odds of winning are about the same as they are of hitting the Powerball.
Right.
Kevin, if I can take 1,000-foot view with Amanda Nunes, I'm trying to figure this out of why she isn't a bigger star than what her talent and her dominance would suggest. When Rousey had her run, she was a huge star in movies, big conversations, everything. She was headlining pay-per-views. To date, I can't remember a pay-per-view that Nunes has headlined. She's been a co-main event most of the time. Is it her opponents? Is it the lack of competition? Is it personality? What is missing, because her talent level is as elite as any fighter out there today right now, of why she's not a bigger star.
Yeah, it's a shame. I agree with you, James, that she's not a bigger star. I think Rousey was kind of like, that comet that just comes by once in a while. I mean, everything hit right for Ronda Rousey. Rousey was, women's MMA came into the UFC because of Ronda Rousey. And so even though it had been around for years before that, excuse me, that's when the general public first started to pay attention to it, when it came into the UFC. And she's beating people in 30 seconds. She's getting compared to Mike Tyson. She was a pretty woman. She was a good talker. She was one of the best trash talkers there were. And so she had all the elements that could make it sell. Now, you go to Amanda, she, English isn't her first language. She's a family person. She brings her baby to the press conference, and, she doesn't have the elements that will appeal to everybody, where Ronda had that. There were a lot of people that bought Ronda fights, James, that wanted to see her lose. Just as many wanted to see her lose as wanted to see her win. It was kind of like with Floyd Mayweather. That's why he sold so many pay-per-views. There was the Floyd fans that wanted to see him win, and there was everybody else that wanted to see him lose. And I think that was with Ronda. With Amanda, it's like, everybody knows she's a nice person. Everybody knows she's a great fighter. But, I don't think that it really, is anything negative to her. I think it's just, the fact where she's placed, and sort of she doesn't have that, crazy, personality like Rousey did.
It's sex appeal, isn't it? I mean, that's what it is, right?
At least
it's unfair.
I don't think it's sex appeal. So I would say, the fact that Ronda was an attractive woman helped. But I think it was far more than that. There's a lot of attractive women in the UFC, but they're not, you don't even know who their names are, right? But I think her appearance helped her. And then I think when you go back and you look and that run of dominance that she had, I mean, hey, look, we found out that Ronda Rousey wasn't the best fighter out there. There were better fighters than her, but nobody had a run of dominance like Ronda had. that played a part. She was an unbelievable trash talker. You know, she was Conor McGregor level trash talker. And because of her appearance, she got movie offers and all that. And so all of that stuff, you know, she did all that stuff outside of MMA. Why did Floyd Mayweather get big? You know what? He appeared on Dancing with the Stars. He was in WrestleMania, you know, and when you do that outside stuff where it's not your niche and people see you, they tend to follow you to what you do and what made you famous. And I think that's what happened with Ronda. It wasn't just sex appeal. It was a whole combination of things.
Joined here by Kevin Iole from Yahoo Sports. Kevin, of course, you're an excellent, accomplished MMA and boxing writer, and I know you're not a huge fan of the sideshow stuff. How much coverage will you personally be doing for this big rematch between Woodley and Paul?
Zero.
Good for you. So you're able to pass off that assignment.
I don't know what's going to happen, but you know, I haven't done the last couple of Paul fights. I didn't even watch the Paul Woodley fight. I saw the highlights on Twitter, right? And I just have no interest in it. And you know, if you get Jake Paul, you know, I understand Jake Paul's popular. I don't understand why Showtime with Paul and Triller with all these other guys want to put boxers in against MMA fighters. You know, and look, I don't think the public gives a shit about it either. Like that Triller Triad show that they did, it was at the Texas Rangers ballpark. That did 8,000 on pay-per-view. 8,000. Wow. Now, what are you thinking they lost on that? You know,
Was that the Frank Gore one?
That's coming up. That was Frank Mir against Kubrat Pulov. What they did on that one, Frank, is they got boxers and they made a team of boxers, and they had team boxing, team MMA, and then they had them fight in a triangle ring with, you know, there was some I don't know what they call it, but they gave different things where they put a little bit of not grappling, but things in like Muay Thai that would help the MMA fighters. And Team MMA won the team competition.
Sounds like Squid Game. Sounds like what you're describing here.
But yeah, it's not good. And I don't understand why these promoters are doing this. And hey, because Jake Paul's popular, if he was fighting regular boxers, I would cover it. But it doesn't prove anything when you fight an MMA fighter. And as long as they're doing those sideshow NBA players and, you know, MMA fighters, I'm not going to cover it. I'm going to ignore it.
And Kevin,
I think we're going to lose one of the Paul brothers soon, because I think he's scheduled to fight Mike Tyson. So.
The other one, right? Logan.
Thank God. And that'll, I think Mike will end that for us real quick.
Yeah.
Listen, Kevin Iole, excellent work, my friend. YahooSports.com. Thank you so much for taking the time, and enjoy the card coming up.
I appreciate you guys.
Great stuff as always. What a pro. By the way, our guy Alex M says, I'm all for the circus. I've already bought it.
Hey, guys, you know, I just got to jump in on something. You know, Kevin was resisting my suggestion that it was sex appeal, but I just don't think that's a fair – I just don't think it's fair to dismiss that for this reason.
Yeah.
There were dominant women fighting, and Dana White didn't want any part of them or women fighting in the league.
Yeah.
He picked her for a reason.
Yeah, he didn't pick Cyborg. He picked Rousey.
No, he didn't pick Cyborg. He picked her, right? And if Amanda Nunes, if we go back in time and we make Amanda Nunes in place of Cyborg, I bet he's not picking Amanda Nunes.
Yeah,
which is why so many of these female fighters complain about this. Yeah. It's a legitimate gripe.
Yeah, I just don't know what Nunes can do at this point. I mean, I thought after the Cyborg win that would catapult her to a new stratosphere. I mean,
right, but that's why she's not. That's why the popularity isn't there. James, you know, I mean, I really think that's it. She looked like Paige Van Zandt or something. It would be, you know, she'd be a meteoric star.
By the way, Paige Van Zandt on Instagram, that's a hot tip. That's a good follow right there. Let's bring on our next guest. I'm really anxious to dive in on a betting perspective here. And I apologize, Jason, for not having very much of a voice. Jason from ParamountSports.com, of course, works very closely with my friend Lee Sterling. Jason, it's nice to see you. Nice to meet you, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. Nice to see you guys.
Of course, the pleasure is all ours. So UFC 269 this Saturday. We like to start with the biggest of the big and move our way down the card. So I've got to get your take, Jason, on this main event, because sort of the consensus that we have with the three of us, and Kevin Iole echoed it for the most part, it's going to be a tremendous fight between Oliveira and Poirier. But I think it's going to be a close fight. You know, Poirier favored by a bit in this one. Oliveira, the champ, is the slight underdog. I think Oliveira has more ways to win, but I think Dustin probably being more powerful and can really pump those leg kicks of his that are so dangerous. I could go either way on this one. I'm leaning to Dustin. Do you have a lean on this one?
It could go either way, as you say. It could be a close fight, but we're leaning towards Oliveira on this one because it's going to be hard for Dustin to kick Oliveira when he's laying on his back. And Oliveira's jiu-jitsu is just outstanding. Early in his career, it seemed like whenever he got in the weeds, he struggled. But he's on a 9-fight win streak, just dominating in every fight. And I just think he's going to take him down and submit him.
I like that. So is there anything else you might like in this fight prop-wise, or are you just going to stick with Oliveira money line?
I think we're going to go with Oliveira money-wise. I don't see it going the distance because Oliveira tends to fade later on, so I can't see him lasting 5 rounds with Poirier. The longer it goes, the more it's going to favor Poirier, unless somehow Oliveira is able to take him down and just dominate him on the ground for the 5 rounds, which is not likely.
Which one here? Go ahead, James.
I was going to say, Jason, I'm curious of where money has been flowing in on this main card. Like which line opened a certain way and may have moved tremendously over the last week or so.
Oh, it started pretty even, and I think more money's coming in on Poirier, and I think it's mostly due to name recognition.
Yeah.
I think Oliveira just suffers from not speaking the language, and Poirier defeated McGregor. People know who he is, and I think for that reason, the line's moving that way.
We're joined here by Jason from ParamountSports.com, and he is the MMA expert from ParamountSports.com. So we like Charles Oliveira on the money line in this one. Now, I got to phrase this a certain way for the co-main event because Amanda Nunes is such a huge favorite. Okay, I'm looking at Nunes minus 1,000, so that's obviously not really a smart proposition. But are there any props you like in this fight? Like we were talking with Kevin Ioli from Yahoo Sports, and he mentioned, maybe taking a look at Nunes inside the distance, right? Because obviously we're not betting Amanda minus 1,000. So how do you look at this co-main?
I would give a shot at what's her name again? At Peña. Juliana Peña.
Juliana Peña.
Thank you. That's what I said.
Yeah.
Everybody laughed at me earlier in the show.
She has more heart than almost any fighter. If you saw her way back in the Ultimate Fighter, I mean, she fights her heart out. She is going to go for that submission till she gets knocked out, or she gets it or she gets knocked out. And, it's worth a shot at. I wouldn't put a lot of money on it, but it's worth a stab at.
Yeah, but for plus 600, what the hell, right? I mean,
yeah.
No, for her to submit her, it's way higher than that.
See that's where we're making real money. That's a good shout. That's a really good shout.
She's not knocking Nunes out, and she's not out grappling her for 5 rounds. So,
I like that. I'm a huge Santiago Ponzinibbio fan. The way that he's come through adversity. The guy's extremely fun to watch. We know he's very well trained at American Top Team. He's taking on Jeff Neal, one down from the co-main event. So do you have any view on this one? And hold on, I'm pulling up the latest odds here. Ponzinibbio slightly favored at minus 135 is what I'm seeing here at BetUS.com. Jeff Neal plus 105. Do you have a lean on this one?
Yes. So Ponzinibbio, as you know, he had that injury, took a couple of years off, came back, got knocked out by the Chinese fighter in his first Jilang Li.
Yep.
Forget how.
I'm glad you took a shot at that one and not me.
Yeah. So, and then in his second fight out, he fought who was undefeated at the time, Miguel Baeza. Baeza started great in the first round, and then Ponzinibbio came on as the fight went on and wound up dominating the last 2 rounds for the unanimous decision. By the time that fight ended, he looked like his former self. And if you look at Jeff Neal, I don't know if you heard about his legal troubles. Lately, he's had some serious, drunk driving. I think he had a weapon in the car. This was within the last 2
perfect.
And in his last 2 outings, he got dominated by Neil Magny. And in the fight before that, he got dominated in a stand. So he got dominated in a grappling match. And prior to that, he got dominated in a stand-up by Stephen Thompson. In this one, I think that Ponzinibbio is going to give him the same type of troubles that Stephen Thompson did. Ponzinibbio has more power, fantastic boxer, and I'm looking for Ponzinibbio to take this one.
One more I wanted to ask you about, and then if you have any other preferred plays, I'd love to hear it. But I'm always interested in watching Dominic Cruz fight. I'm just so respectful of his career and his legacy. He's actually fighting on the prelims, so people don't even have to pay to watch.
Yeah, Alex,
Cruz
the UFC's not so respectful of his legacy.
I guess
They got
not,
in the
right?
middle of
I
the
mean,
prelims.
They put him on the prelim. They know that he can get ratings. I think is why they put him on the prelims.
In the middle of the prelims, by the way.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And so Dominic Cruz, I think it's going to be a pretty good fight against Pedro Munoz. And this is basically a pick'em fight, Jason. I mean, I'm looking at Dominic Cruz minus 110, Munoz minus 120. So pick your poison here. Do you have any lean on this one?
Well, this is one that we're actually laying off, and only for the reason that Cruz has been so inactive. I mean, his last fight out, he won a split decision against Casey Kenny, who's a pretty solid fighter. Munoz seems to always disappoint in the big events. He laid an egg against Edgar, although I thought he won that fight. Aldo dominated him, but really it's hard to say we haven't seen Cruz in a while, so it's hard to say what he's going to do. So if Cruz has his movement, I don't think Munoz is going to get a hand on him, and I think he'll win a decision like he always does. But it remains to be seen, what kind of shape he's in. He's had so many injuries. I don't think any fighter has overcome more injuries than this guy. It's just incredible.
Yeah, it's unreal. Well, let us know, because we went over a few, cherry-picked a few of the fights that I'm looking forward to most. Are there any other plays you might be able to throw out that you really like for this card, whether it's main card or prelims, UFC 269?
Yeah, well, there's a couple early fights that we like. There were a couple that we're going to save, but I'm going to give you an upset special here.
Ooh.
And I think Cody Garbrandt is going to get knocked out.
I like it. Okay.
What's the odds on that one, Jason?
Excuse me?
What's the odds on that fight? What's the value there?
Let me get that for you.
Well, I'm looking at plus 300 on my
favorite. He's minus 135.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm at the knockout. I'm looking at plus 300 for Kara France to win by knockout.
Or Kai Kara France to win by knockout.
Right, exactly. For Kara France to win by knockout.
Right, that was the regular odds. Now, Garbrandt, as you know, has been knocked out several times. He just got dominated by Rob Font, so he's going down to flyweight. He was the 135 champ. Now he's going back down to flyweight. I think he thinks that he's going to have a big power advantage, and he's going to want to stand in the pocket and bang with these guys. And Kai Kara France is a talented guy. He's coming off a knockout of a pretty tough fighter, Roger Bontorin, who looked great in his last outing. And I just think that that Garbrandt, he's not the smartest fighter, the way he fights. I don't know if he's a smart guy overall, but when
he doesn't seem like a smart guy either.
You see the neck tattoo of me.
I'm just talking about in the ring, There's lots of smart people that can't play football or whatever, or basketball. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Oh man! Anything else you like?
There's a fight. It's the seventh fight on the card. Brazilian fighter named Bruno Silva in the middleweight division. He's fighting Jordan Wright, the Beverly Hills Ninja.
Love it.
He was 12-1. Bruno Silva is a big favorite in regular odds. He's minus 345, but he's only plus 160 minus 165 to knock out Jordan Wright. Jordan Wright's had 3 fights in the UFC. He's 2-1. He beat 2 not good fighters, and he got knocked out by Buckley, the guy that did the flying kick.
The kick,
Joaquin Buckley.
Yeah.
Is that his name? Yeah. And I just think that Silva has tremendous power, and I think he's just going to destroy Jordan Wright. Jordan Wright comes out like a bat out of hell, and I think he's going to just play right into Silva's hands, and he's going to be unconscious in a minute.
Well, I love the insight.
We're thinking about even doing a first round KO on this one.
Ooh, that's a good tidbit as well. Well, I really appreciate it and enjoy the pay-per-view. And make sure you guys check it out. ParamountSports.com is the website. Great people like Jason and Lee putting in God's work, Jason, because I can only imagine the amount of film that you and Lee study leading up to these things. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you guys. Take care. Have a
Hey,
good day.
Jason.
Stuff. Yeah, man. I feel ready. I feel financially ready for this one, guys. I feel I'm
Think
getting
you're gonna
to
live
be,
that long? I mean, you sound like you're really breaking down.
you're not gonna let me hear the end of it. I'm trying. I'm trying to
I'm
get
a little
that phlegm
nervous.
out.
I mean, I was with you a couple of days ago.
Yeah, you should
maybe
probably
maybe it's-
get some vitamin C now. You probably should.
How about those prelim picks? Those are the hardest ones to predict. 'Cause,
Yeah.
half the time I'm halfway paying attention to the prelims, and
Yeah.
unless like you see a Dominic Cruz or something like that, then you really kind of zone into those fights. But
Sure.
Why is Dominic Cruz still fighting, guys? Why is he still fighting?
Because I think he's not. I think he missed a lot of time during his career. Let's remember, for all those knee injuries that he had. So I kind of feel like he's making up for lost time, is the way that he looks at it. Listen, guys, he's not far away from potentially earning another title shot. So I think Dominic Cruz is looking at this and saying, "I'm still in the mix here."
yeah, and he can kind of double dip with the commentating and fighting. Fight a couple
Right.
times a year, commentate 5 or 6 times a year. I'm sure he's making pretty good money doing both at the same time that he might not be making if he did just one.
I just don't see him as a legitimate title contender. Maybe I'm being unfair to him, but where he is right now, all the time he has missed, I don't see it. And then to take a guy of that kind of stature and stick him in the middle of the prelims, what are we doing? Like, I just, he's really good at the commentating.
He
And
is.
he really is. He has a very, very long career doing that if he chooses to. And I'd like to see him do more of it and less support of the part of the pay-per-view that people like James and I aren't even watching.
No, and I agree with Alex M. I mean, he's still in the top 5. Now, you mentioned what a great commentator he is, and he is excellent. He recently criticized a member of his fraternity, not only the commentating fraternity, but former fighters. I was really taken aback and surprised
Likewise.
by what he said about Daniel Cormier. Like, I was shocked. Like, honestly, I've followed Dominic Cruz for basically his entire career. I've been a fan of his. He seemed like a good guy most of the time. But I really thought what he said about DC made him sound like an asshole. Like, he criticized DC's commentary, saying like, "Oh, I don't think this guy watches film. Like, I don't think this guy studies," because I guess he's had a problem in the past about the way the DC has called some of his fights. I mean, do you get that sense, James? And I know you were pretty fired up about this story as well.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, listen, I'm not going to say DC is on Cruz's level, and I think even DC admitted that, because Dominic Cruz apparently locks himself up in the home theater and just watches hours of film, and he's tremendous at it. But I really thought that was an unnecessary shot to take at DC. I think DC does a fine job. Why are you calling out the guy's preparation?
Yeah, and Cruz isn't the first person to criticize DC. I forgot who criticized him and said, maybe it was Connor, said he shows up drunk to the fights and stuff like that.
I think it was. Yeah, which is like, yeah, I mean.
For whatever reason, DC is like the nicest guy in MMA, yet everyone wants it to be open season on him for some reason. I really don't get where all the recent hate is for him. But as far as his commentating, he's fine. Like I said, he's not upper echelon, the number one guy in MMA commentating, but he's serviceable enough. He's not bad. He's not awful. Obviously, he has experience and insight. But yeah, I just don't know. That kind of came out of nowhere, especially coming from Dominic Cruz. I mean, don't they work together occasionally? Won't they have a future card together?
And then also the way that Dominic tried to play it off, because like his DC and they did a podcast together, and DC kind of confronted him about it, and Cruz was like, "Oh, it's constructive criticism. Don't worry about it." But it's like, why do if you want to give me constructive criticism, call me. Call me.
Yeah.
Like, why are you doing it? In front of a international audience? It was weird.
Look, guys, I think Cormier is like a slightly better informed Joe Rogan. When you have Joe Rogan, then I think Cormier's lack of preparation and technical analysis really exposes itself. But when you don't have Joe Rogan and you have Cormier and say, Dominic and Paul Felder, let's say those are the three guys, then I think Cormier's role is outstanding. I think he's great in that capacity. But I think Dominic Cruz, if you want a little psychological insight, I think he's pissed off that Daniel Cormier got the Peyton Manning version of MMA breakdowns of, really big time things. I think Dominic Cruz thinks he should have gotten that deal. He said, I put in the work. I demonstrated I know this shit better. And this big bastard got the role just because he's lovable and, has a great personality. And it's just, I think he's pissed off about it. And I don't blame him, actually.
I was going to say, that's a great point because I would agree that Dominic Cruz would be a better fit for that. But I don't know. It seems like a spiteful way to go.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I think he is being spiteful. And I wanted to share a story about Daniel Cormier just to share how nice a guy he is. Alex will remember when I was trying very hard to take over the show up on ESPN West Palm years ago.
Yeah.
And they were putting me through it. And then the guy I was working with didn't want to help sometimes.
You were doing so well that you got sabotaged, I think. Somebody didn't want you on that show anymore.
But I had to do the interview by myself, and I got a very brief tutorial on how to use the board. So they patched me into Daniel Cormier. I really don't know what I'm doing. And I'm 15 minutes into an interview that should have lasted 8 minutes. And I realized I never hit the record button.
No.
And I go, Daniel, bro, can you do a little longer? Because I didn't hit the record button. He goes, no problem. Did another 20 minutes.
Wow.
With me. Who am I? It was just, he's an unbelievably kind, generous person. And so I really like him. But having said that, he's not the technical savant that Dominic Cruz is when it comes to analyzing fights.
Well, neither are you, apparently. You forgot to hit the record button.
Well, what the hell anybody had letting me into a radio studio just defies all logic.
By the way, did the PR company freak out that you kept him on for so long? Because I've been there before. When you have like a 10-minute block book.
They did. He kept telling her
to kill you.
Yeah, they kept telling her he kept telling her, no, I'm staying on. I'm staying on. So,
awesome.
Yeah. Good guy.
Awesome. Well, let's take a final look, guys, here at the card to come. Let's circle back to the main event because we heard Kevin Ioli's in-depth thoughts. We heard Jason from Paramount Sports, his in-depth thoughts. Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier. I do believe, I think Kevin and Jason both touched on this, that the longer this fight goes on, the more that I would favor Poirier. That Oliveira, to me, is the much bigger threat to pick up a stoppage victory early, whereas Poirier could pick up a late stoppage or a decision victory in this one. I give a lot of respect to Oliveira. We've seen him pull off insane chokes and submissions. He's got a ton of power in his hands as well. I think that Poirier can use his jab and his very dangerous leg kicks to keep him at bay. One of the reasons why, even though I'm picking Poirier, and I think I might lay off on this one, at least as far as placing a money line bet here. Like I might lay off this one, but I'm leaning to, as a personal pick, I'm leaning to Poirier just because of, his durability, the cardio, and the fact that he's got more power. But I got to tell you, man, if Poirier tries to mess around on the ground with Oliveira, he's going to be in big trouble because sometimes Dustin Poirier will try and fake certain submissions to kind of advance his position or set up other. You do not want to do anything that's going to get you in that boa constrictor-like grip of Charles Oliveira, who can really make Dustin Poirier pay. So, I think I'm leaning to this being like a late fourth round stoppage for Dustin Poirier. And guys, if it plays out like that, I think it's going to be an incredibly entertaining fight because I think that Oliveira is going to have some success early on, and then Poirier is really going to come on and gain momentum later. One thing that does concern me a bit, and Frank, you and I talked about this a little bit in person earlier in this week, I hope Poirier has kind of moved past some of the mental demons because in his previous life, down at featherweight, he had a reputation of every time he got the big fight or the title eliminator, he would come up short in the biggest spots. Now, he has earned himself his title shot here, so you have to hope that mental block of his in big fights doesn't show up.
Go ahead, James. I'll let you go.
Yeah, I'm staying away from this one as well. If there was a bet on this, but I don't know, man. Oliveira doesn't make many mistakes. He's super technical. With the striking, his jiu-jitsu is the best in the division. There's just more avenues for him to win. The only thing, and I know this is, Kevin Iolu says it's a misnomer, but when Justin Gaethje says it, it kind of perked my eyes up that Poirier might be tougher, and this could come down to a battle of wills. This could come down to where both guys are hurting in the 4th and 5th rounds, the championship rounds, and who has the toughness, who's been through the wars enough to still grit it out. And so that's the best way I could see Poirier winning it, is just to inflict so much damage that it's a little too much for Oliveira in the 4th and 5th rounds. But just technically, I just feel like if it goes to the ground, that's to Oliveira. And Oliveira, he doesn't have the power that Poirier has, but he does have enough technical ability to stand up. He showed that against Michael Chandler, with the knockout. So I'm leaning towards Oliveira, but really it's a 50-50 fight. I'm just going to sit back and watch it and enjoy it and see where it goes.
I think it's Oliveira who's looser. And for reasons I mentioned earlier in the show, I just think the consensus, even in the camps, is that, this is Dustin Poirier's belt and he's just coming to get it.
Yeah.
I think you better be careful. I think he's going to come in tight. I think Charles Oliveira is going to be loose. And when was the last time Oliveira lost? Does anyone even know what year that was? Because I remember the last time Poirier lost.
Yeah, the last time, hold on, Charles Oliveira lost, just so I have it. It was 2017 when he lost to Paul Felder.
Paul Felder. Oh.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
This man's done a lot of victories since then. Yeah, I'm leaning Oliveira more and more. And you make money doing that.
Yeah, plus points.
Yeah,
plus
money.
The money line. Yeah.
How pissed are you guys that we don't have Masvidal on this card?
It's a buzzkill. Like, I'll phrase it this way. How many people do you think are now choosing not to buy this card because Masvidal is not on it? I'm sure that's 100%. a lot more prevalent in my area code, the 305. Like, I'm sure that they're probably, maybe internationally people would have bought this for the title fight regardless, the 2 title fights, I should say. But I know that as far as the buzz goes in Miami, it would have been a different animal if he was still on the card.
Yeah, to me, that's more of the people's main event situation, to where that's the fight that people wanted to see. And, the other fights might be, title fights of more importance and things like that. But to me, the Masvidal-Edwards fight is like the Chandler-Gaethje fight in the last pay-per-view. That was the fight I was most excited for the pay-per-view. Was the Chandler-Gaethje fight. It delivered. To me, I think Masvidal-Edwards kind of would have been similar to that. And then after that fight, you can also enjoy the title fights. I mean, it really would have been a good lead into everything. But we can't always get nice things, right, as MMA fans.
Yeah, I guess Masvidal's just waiting for Colby Covington. So I guess we'll have to wait till early next year for that one. We didn't talk at all about Aldo's victory. We're running out of time, but my man still got it.
Alex, you're on mute.
I was going to say, I think, was I the only person on the show last week that picked against him? I think I was, right?
You were.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm going to stop picking against Aldo. Because
and what a warrior, man! He's got like a broken orbital bone.
Yeah, it's
and
insane.
Font's got a busted nose and orbital fracture. So they were hitting.
And we were talking last week about Aldo's place in the all-time pound-for-pound rankings, and the crazy thing about it was we were talking about the guy as if he's retired already. Like, his story's not done being written. Right? I mean, he could still make a bantamweight title run to at least challenge for the belt. So his story is not completely written. For any conversation we had about, is he outside the top 10, outside the top 15? He might be a sure thing inside the top 10, but by the time he's done.
Yeah, I was already kind of writing him off, saying he might hang around too long, longer than we'd want. And from what he showed Saturday, he still has plenty of gas left, plenty of time left. So who do you think should be his next opponent in that division? Where does he go from Font?
It's a tough spot for him, because he's already been obliterated by the champion, right? So
yeah,
or the person who should be, I guess.
Yeah, right, exactly. I think he's going to fight. I think he should get an opportunity to fight Jan again. I think if so. Yeah. By the way, I'm being called the mush. People know that I'm the mush. Alex M reminding me that I was the one guy on the show that picked against Jose Aldo, and then you looked what happened. He He turned it up. So guys, Jon Jones, I want to throw this in before we wrap up this episode. Jon Jones is targeting a return either in April, which I think is at Madison Square Garden, or around July, International Fight Week in Las Vegas. Now, it's interesting he's talking about making his return when he still doesn't have his legal situation sorted out yet. You know, he's making that jump up to heavyweight. I'm looking forward to watching Jon Jones fight at heavyweight, so I hope the return happens sooner than later. What do you think?
Well, I know one thing. He's not going to get that $10 million a fight that he was looking for. You can throw that pretty much out the window. He lost all leverage with his legal situation. So, and it sounds like if he's ready to return, that he's pretty much given up on that. That, maybe he feels like he has to prove himself for one fight. I mean, does he step into the title fight? If he wants to fight in April, that tells me he doesn't expect to get a title fight because Cyril Gane and Francis Ngannou are fighting in January. So they're not going to return that quick. Now, International Fight Week.
That's a good point.
That could be the winner of Gane and Ngannou versus Jon Jones for International Fight Week. So that makes more sense, to me, for him to wait until July to do that. But, I mean, I've said this a couple times on the show. Jon Jones has to figure out his life, first. I'm not that interested in him as I was, before. Now he's had this layoff and he's still having his personal and legal troubles.
James, I only half agree with you about Jones losing half or all his leverage. I only half agree with that. First of all, I think he returns in April against Stipe Miocic. I think that will be his welcome to the heavyweight
I hope
division.
he beats Stipe. I don't know why. I can't explain why, but I don't like Stipe. He's just he's boring. And he's also cockier than a boring guy should be. He's just a boring human being.
And he's also the kind of victory for Jon Jones, should he earn it, that makes him a superstar box office smash hit for his next title shot, in the heavyweight division. Now, the reason I said I think I disagree with you halfway, James, is I think if Cyril Gane wins against Ngannou, then I think Jon Jones' stock goes up markedly because I think Cyril Gane is still relatively unknown. And I'm not sure what a marketing machine he might be. Francis Ngannou is like the Mike Tyson, or if you go back way back in the day, the George Foreman of the UFC, this monstrous, terrifying force that would just market itself. And then I think if Ngannou is successful against Cyril Gane, then Jon Jones is completely disposable, unless I could talk him going and saving our 205-pound division, which is now ruled by a middle-aged guy from Connecticut.
It's crazy. Now, it means Brazil by way of Connecticut.
It sounds better when I say Connecticut.
It does.
Danbury, Connecticut.
Yeah. But if Cyril Gane wins against Ngannou, do you think, and it really depends on, I guess, how dominant the victory is, but you'd like to, just based on the pattern of behavior from the UFC in the past, because Ngannou is a very popular, very accomplished champion, do you think they would lean to doing the immediate rematch between Ngannou and Gane? Or do you think that, hey, you've got an opportunity to put Jon Jones in a title fight, you don't wait? Because that's the way that I would look at it. Honestly, no matter what happens between Ngannou and Gane, I would much prefer, if I were Dana White, not to put Jon Jones in there against Stipe, because then you risk losing the Jon Jones title fight. I would just let Jon fight the champion no matter who wins.
Well, you're probably right, because you got to move quickly, because Jon's going to do something stupid and take himself out of usability. So as long as he's, currently available, I guess you got to use him.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And I think the UFC, for whatever reason, has soured a little bit on Francis Ngannou. I mean, they put in the interim title fight because he wouldn't fight in September and things like that. So if he loses, I don't think they give him an immediate rematch. I think they might make him win a fight or at least wait, based on the recent track record the UFC has showed with Ngannou. Because, I mean, I disagree from the jump that they should have made that an interim title fight because he won the belt in March. And just because he didn't fight in September, they already gave someone else his interim belt in his division. It seemed kind of weird to me. So I don't think he's really highly favored right now. That could change, obviously, but at least in the last few months from what I've seen.
James, I think they're mad because, the guy, it's not like he's good doing 5-round wars. He's in the cage for, a minute and a half. He's hardly broken his sweat. His opponent's, unconscious. So, come on, you can do this again in 6 months. Good grief.
That's a good point.
Great point. That's true.
Listen, I've had a lot of fun tonight. Huge shout out again.
Yeah,
to
you
our
sound
guests.
like it.
Hey, I'm trying to get this voice back, man. I'm gonna sip some tea tonight. I'm gonna take like a steam bath or something. I'm hurting right now. So I appreciate Frank and James. I appreciate you guys helping carrying me through this one. And I'm gonna lose the voice all over again on Saturday night because the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. They have every UFC pay-per-view fight, including 269 this Saturday night, for zero cover charge. You pay nothing at the door to watch UFC pay-per-views at the Quarterdeck, so you can enjoy from the prelims, watching Dominic Cruz, to the main card, watching Oliveira and Poirier. Enjoy every second of the action at the Quarterdeck. I love the outdoor patios where you get the big screen out there. Guys, the seafood is so delicious. When I was at the Quarterdeck the other day, I enjoyed a fresh poke bowl. It was incredible. It was so good. The buffalo shrimp is my favorite appetizer on the planet. The mahi-mahi is always fresh. And if you're not a seafood fan, there's plenty for you, believe me. The sandwiches and burgers are incredible. I love the French dip sandwich. I love the jerk chicken sandwich. There's so many options and so many sides. You can get curly fries, regular fries, sweet potato fries, tater tots, which is always a go-to. Telling you, the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. And I hope to see a lot of you out there this coming Wednesday. We'll be watching the Miami Heat there on December 15th at the Quarterdeck Davie. So come see us at Davie. If you want to check out the Quarterdeck before then, find the location nearest to you and check out their menu at quarterdeckrestaurants.com. The Quarterdeck, come for the food, stay for the fun. You know, when I started the show, my self-esteem was like here because I thought I can get through this. I've got enough voice to get it. And then I hear Frank Zaffere chuckling, and I'm like, oh, no, this is not good. This is not good at all.
It was worth the wait, bro. You're a tough guy, Alex.
Yep.
You're a tough guy.
I try. Well, listen, it's not like this job is that hard. I'm not like shoveling snow and building, laying bricks or anything like that. We can do it. Voice is pretty important for what we do, but I'll get it back by next week, I promise. So huge thank you to James Walker. You see where to follow him on Twitter at James Walker NFL. Frank Zaffere doesn't display his Twitter account because he's like one of these weird artists where like he doesn't want you to know where to find him. I'll tell you where to find him at realfrank_Z. He's private, so you have to request to follow him. Eventually he'll log in and grant your request. You can follow me at Alex Donno. Everyone enjoy UFC 269 this weekend. Watch it out at the Quarterdeck. We will talk to you guys again next time on another episode of 5 Rounds on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. See ya.